Hey, welcome to the download. What'll it be? Hello again, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the Lowdown at the Down Low. So here at the Down Low, we get one-on-one with the cast and crew of the audio series Heroes of Extinction. And as always, I'm your host, Jason Braden, and today on our show, we are honored to have the multi-talented actor of voice and screen, Mr. Michael Yurchak. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So really quick, I mean, I know I've been calling you Michael since we, kind of started this, but I mean, is it okay to call you Mike? Which do you prefer to go by?
Yeah, you can call me either one. Michael is how I usually introduce, and then as we get to be buddies, we can switch them up.
Okay, well, I'll see what my comfort level is as we go a little bit deeper into this. So let's talk about yourself for a second. I mean, you got a lot of accolades under your belt here. You've done, I think theater. You've done live action. You've done voice acting. How did you get into all this?
Well, I guess I have been acting my whole life, in one way, shape, or form. I was lucky enough to go to schools that had, all of which had, kind of strong drama departments and so on. And so I always knew it was something that I enjoyed. I sort of put it aside in high school while I was kind of getting into what I felt like at the time was being a serious athlete. But then my senior year of high school, I got injured and I decided to go out for a play because my shoulder was messed up and I couldn't swim. And I decided to go out for a play, and I played Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream and totally fell back in love with it and kind of felt like I had a little something unique to contribute. So I followed that into college, and I acted through college, did sketch comedy and a lot of the plays and things like that at my school, and became kind of the first theater. I was actually the first theater major to graduate from Colgate University, which is this little liberal arts school in the upper Northeast. I right after school, I moved right out to Los Angeles and started kicking the tires as much as I could until somebody let me in. So I do a little bit of everything. I do theater less now that I have kids, but I have always done theater. I usually do a play a year or something like that, sometimes more, sometimes less. I do a fair amount of on-camera stuff, movies and television and things like that. And then voiceover kind of fell in behind that stuff as I was looking for new opportunities and so on as a young actor. And it's actually been from the beginning the thing that has made most sense, or it's been the most kind of trackable success chart. And I kind of got lucky with it very quickly, and it's been I play at the highest level in terms of that stuff, which has just been super fortunate and fun. In the meantime, I actually went back to graduate school twice, got a master's and a PhD in what's called applied theater, and that all continues to be part. I teach and I work and I think and write about the craft as a whole. So I'm deeply invested in the idea of being an actor, and then sometimes people are nice enough to let me do it.
So I'm going to kind of circle back to when you were younger, because you said you were into sports, and I think you said you injured your shoulder so you couldn't swim anymore. That's the sport you were doing, was swimming?
I was a soccer player, a swimmer, and a tennis player. And then throughout the years, I played hockey and I played baseball a little bit and so on. But in high school, those were my three big sports.
So how was the support from your family and friends when you decided to take that leap from sports into theater?
They were very supportive and very kind. It was the sort of thing where the school I went to, while it was a small school, it was the college, I should say. It was all Division I athletics, and so even at my peak, I wouldn't have been able to play Division I soccer, or and had no real interest in putting the time into being a Division I swimmer, and so I wasn't going to do that at school, but I was, I had always been involved with something extracurricular, and everybody was psyched for me and excited to come up to campus and watch me do plays and things like that. And so, it was no letdown. I wasn't ever going to be a professional athlete. And I'm sure nobody really probably thought that I'd be crazy enough to try to be a professional actor either, but I was.
Well, okay.
So,
So when you're younger, I mean, I mean, you can even go back into like when you were in like, grade school and high school and stuff like that. Did you have any ambitions for being an actor at that point? Or was it just sort of, I don't know what I want to be. I'm kind of developing it as I go along.
yeah, not per se. I don't think the thing is, I was not the kind of kid that thought about what I would do as a grown up for a job. It was the kind of thing where, yeah, like, sure, I thought it'd be cool to be on a commercial, or it'd be cool to be in a TV show, or it'd be cool to be, E.T. was a big movie of our childhood, right? We just
Yes,
in
definitely.
the pre-interview, we found out that we're basically the same age. So it's like, I remember thinking that the kid that played Elliot had a cool gig. Something cool was there. I don't know what that is or how you do it, but he seems like my age exactly, and he seems like, that seems like it would be really neat to hang around with an alien and and Drew Barrymore. So I guess I had some dreams about it, but not. It didn't crystallize honestly for me as being a viable or something that I thought about, like, well, maybe I could do this for my real job until my senior year of college, and then it was. I kind of, it got to be towards the end of the year, and where was I going to move and what was I going to do? Like, what was going to be the next step? Everybody's asking themselves these questions. Some people are taking interviews with sort of widget sales, departments who are coming to campus and giving interviews and so on. And that none of that interested me, but I was sort of really, really enjoying all the work that I'd been doing on campus, creating and writing and performing and so on. And so I thought about that. The only other thing I actually did think about, and something that developed a little bit in college and then has pretty much gone away, except for when I occasionally play one in a sort of farcical nature, was that I used to do the radio announcing for the hockey team and the basketball team at Colgate. And Colgate is a big hockey school, especially. So we would go deep into the NCAA tournament every year, and the basketball team was just coming into its own while I was there as well. So those were fun games. We would go and play against big schools, and I would travel with the team and sort of set up and do the play-by-play and everything. And it was really, really fun to do that. And I thought for a hot second about trying to pursue that after school. But honestly, I don't know. I was just more in love with the idea of being an actor by then, and so I that's the way I went.
So let's fast forward a little bit to when you did move to LA and you started, doing everything you could to beat down doors and, nag people until you got an interview or, like cast in a role for whatever. Do you remember like what your actual first role was when you started getting into this? Okay, what was it?
Yeah. So there was my first television role. Well, let me back up one. So the first thing that really, and I should have said this right away. The thing that really sort of set the hook was while I was in college, the summer after my freshman year, my best friend from high school's grandfather, who was a man named Norman McLean, had written this famous book called A River Runs Through It. Oh. And that book was purchased or the rights to that book were purchased by Robert Redford and his company, and they made it into a movie, and it was shooting that summer. As part of the rights, sale, the author, who was a great educator, stipulated that a certain number of students had to be hired on to different departments as a learning experience. And I got to be one of them. So my buddy and I got to go to Montana and shoot this movie. I was a production assistant, got to go and shoot this movie for the summer. And I had never been west of Chicago, and I had definitely never been on the set of a movie before. So I was on set, and it was just awesome, so fun. One of my jobs was to bring Robert Redford his coffee every morning. So he liked his coffee caramel colored. And so you had to pour the exact right amount, or so I thought, the exact right amount of creamer into the coffee to make it a caramel color. So, a higher up production person taught me this day one. And then it was like, you got it, kid? All right, bring it to the Airstream, and then I would nervously bring Bob his coffee every morning and, knock on the door and he'd answer. And I'd nervously wait for him to look. And, I was always expecting him to be like, throw the coffee back in my face and be like, this, you call this caramel colored? But of course he never did that. It was whatever I handed him, he was going to take. But anyway, yeah, so that was my first look at it. And it was amazing. It was a beautiful film. It won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. It was Brad Pitt's first big movie after having done Thelma and Louise. And so it was like he was Brad Pitt before being Brad Pitt. And at that time, I was 19, he was 26. My buddy was also 19. The three of us and a couple of other of the younger people on cast and crew hung out together. So I was like buddies, best friends that summer because we lived in the middle of the mountains, like with nothing around us. We would hang out together every day. And at the time, Brad Pitt was one of my good friends. It's like, well, good luck with everything. At the end of it, I was going back to college and poor Brad was going to go back to his apartment and, try to eke a living out of the entertainment industry. And little do I know that he's going to become this gargantuan movie star. So anyway, that was the beginning of the idea, I guess. So it was a little sooner than I had originally said.
Let's fast forward. Several years later, I'm putting air quotes around several. Now you are in this incredible show called Heroes of Extinction. Yeah. So let's kind of lead up a little bit to how you met Mr. Jerry Cornell or C. Andrew Nelson. I mean, how did you actually get cast for the role that you're in?
Sure. Well, so I mentioned earlier that I do a lot of teaching. I teach at a conservatory, but I also teach private students coaching in voiceover. And one of my students, a woman named Jacqueline, worked with me for a few months and really excelled. She was young at the time, 17 or 18, I think, when we started, and was a real talent and such a sweet person. And I kind of became close with her family, as you do especially with younger students, because mom and dad were always involved and careful and shepherding her along the way. And so after we said goodbye, I was like, I bet we'll meet again sometime. Who knows what it'll be and who knows if if it'll be soon. But as luck would have it, a couple of years after, maybe a year or so, I can't totally put it on a timeline for you, but shortly after she finished up with me, she was having some success. She lives in Florida. She was having some success getting herself jobs doing voiceover, animation, this kind of stuff. And she called me, or her mom called me, and asked if I would be okay with them sharing my information with a producer who was casting a project that needed sort of a villain type, kind of an arch villain type. And, was I interested? And I said, sure, it'd be super fun to get to do a job together. So yeah, definitely have them give me a call. So Jerry called me or emailed me, I'm sure, and just kind of presented me with the idea, asked me to, I don't know that it was an audition, but it was like what would you do something like this? Do you have an idea for it? And I was like, yeah, here, let me record something. I'll send it to you. I did. He was like, yes, that's awesome. Let's do it. So shortly after that, I recorded The Fire Reaper, and it was super fun. And it's a great script. It's a recognizable hero type or villain type, I should say. This kind of embittered, somewhat damaged young man, this guy, Kenneth Egan, who is, sort of has a dark past, which is hinted at, but we don't totally know what it is yet in episode 1. And then eventually he lets go, and we discover that his alter ego is this, kind of diabolical villain-esque guy who is the Fire Reaper. And I got to do both of them, which is awesome.
And it turns out that he has somewhat of a past with the hero that's taking over the role of the current superhero who is losing all of his powers. And for those who have heard the first episode, they will actually know who I'm talking about. And Jacqueline, who is, very, very talented young lady. Mm-hmm. She is actually the voice of the computer that speaks to the hero in his ear called Skyo. And she does a fantastic sort of computerized voice throughout the entire show. And it's funny, even though it's kind of like artificial intelligence, there's some comedy to it. Similar how Jarvis talks to Iron Man all the time.
Yes,
it's not always, like statistics and flight plans and things like that. Every once in a while, there's some humor in it because she only answers the way that she knows how to answer, but there's comedy in the way it's presented to a human.
Yeah.
So yeah, it all comes together really well. That's interesting because most of the people that I've actually interviewed so far have all been introduced to either Jerry or Andrew through like a convention. They go to conventions and, there's people that are signing autographs and things like that. And you think you're the first one that's actually just been kind of like word of mouth for the most part, which is fantastic because that's honestly how I'm actually here talking to you right now, is that I had a friend who knew a friend. And, I played a character in the show called Chuck the Bartender, hence the background that nobody else can see except for you right now.
I was just noticing that background.
Yeah. So it's kind of appropriate because the name of the show is the Lowdown at the Down Low. The Down Low is the bar where all the heroes go.
Yes.
So it's just funny how we all kind of get here just by knowing people, and it just keeps growing from there. So we're going to go ahead and set up like a quick little clip. And it is, I believe, the first time the Fire Reaper is really truly introduced for his villainous side. And this is the one where I'm talking about where he has sort of like a nasty past with the current, well, I can't say the current superhero, but the character Janessa, when she's a child. There's an incident at a beach where the Fire Reaper kind of gets a little bit nasty with her parents. So we're going to go ahead and listen to that now. Let's take a listen.
Jason glances over and smiles as Janessa holds up the sea creature in her tiny hand.
Come on. Enough of this gloom and doom. Better not keep her waiting.
That's right. You better keep an eye on your daughter, Mr. Jensen. Or shall I say, Earth Mover.
Caroline gasps as the Fire Reaper looms on a nearby boulder. She whips her head around and spots Janessa playing with the starfish, unaware of their new visitor.
How do you know my identity? The council hasn't released it yet. It was supposed to be the lure.
Oh my, don't you know by now? Being the head of the division and all, I just assumed you'd have known that the initiative has their hands in everything. Both sides included.
Caroline tries to stand, but the Fire Reaper shoots a blast of energy just in front of her.
I don't think so.
They have nothing to do with this. This is between me and the initiative. They're human, Reaper. Just let them go.
Now see, that's where you're wrong. I mean, wife here is a lowly human, but that little girl over there... the initiative has reason to believe that little one is of value.
You'll never touch her, you freak.
The Fire Reaper narrows his eyes and focuses his energy on Caroline. Summoning up a scorching ball of heat, he throws it in her direction. Caroline screams, but the blast never hits her. Jason is turned into Earth Mover and deflects the fireball with his own Earth energy out into the ocean where it fizzles into steam.
You'll have to do better than that, Fire Reaper.
Daddy! Mommy!
Janessa comes running towards her parents, oblivious to the danger.
Did you see the steam, Daddy? It was out in the water. A big poof.
Stay away, baby! Do not come over here!
The Fire Reaper turns to look at Janessa. A twisted smile spreads across his face. Janessa stops and stares at his menacing glare.
It's your call, Earth Mover. Hand her over, and you and your wife live. Fight this, and you can go to hell.
All right, so I know that we've done this clip in other interviews before. It's super intense because it kind of sets up the story and everything, and you're a little intimidating as a bad guy. Is that something that you're used to playing?
The role that I became most well known for is a bad guy, which is for this show called Naruto, and I played two sides again, bizarrely, it's like not such a dissimilar kind of setup, but one side of this character is this kind of like silly, impish character, and the other side is a very dark character. Very different pitch, or different style villain, but it was a villain. So I did have some exposure to playing the villain, but this is the one that has always been in my mind and has always been kind of swimming around, and was just super awesome to play,
Do you think you have more of a preference to play a villain than a good guy, or does it really matter to you?
I didn't think I had a preference toward it. If I had to have guessed, I would have thought I would want to play the hero. But as it turns out, actually, I really do like playing the villain. I've always gotten cast, except in like real, circumstances where they just didn't have someone else to do it. I've always been a character guy, which tended towards either anti-hero or comedic relief of some kind. And so I had played a lot of those kinds of characters other than hero. But the idea of playing the villain or a villain, sort of villain of some magnitude, hadn't really crossed my mind until I started playing some stuff in animation. So yeah, now I love it. And, I have my voice sounds younger. And so I can occasionally throw a hero out there, but I find the hero roles are like they're sort of the plot drivers, and though they are interesting and exciting and fun, and I've got no qualms about heroes and the actors who play them, the villains tend to be like the fun ones. They're like the weird ones, the interesting ones, the sort of unhinged ones. And as an actor, that for me is really, really fun, to get to do.
I have yet to play a villain, but I hope to someday. And honestly, I hope it's something a little monstrous because I want to play with it. I want to have fun with it. I understand what you're saying, because it kind of just, you have the heroes up here, which are kind of streamlined, and then they go up, and sometimes they get a little dark too. Heroes can be a little bit on the evil side. They can have their bad days.
Sure.
But yeah, villains, they just have like a darker story, a darker past. And I don't know, it just seems like something a lot more fun to do. You've done a lot of voices over your career. I'm assuming that, they kind of vary from time to time, obviously. Is there any particular preparation or way you had to change your voice? You're like, oh, I don't want people to know that this just sounds like me. I need to change it just a little bit. Was there any sort of preparation for preparing for the Fire Reaper?
Yeah. So to me, I always kind of start with the kind of the archetypes that I feel like a character is based on, and the sort of maniacal villain archetype is one with a long and glorious history. So I had people in mind, everything from the Joker from Batman to Skeletor from the old He-Man cartoons, and to probably the Wicked Witch of the West. There is this kind of like cackling, screechy kind of guy that shows up everywhere, and that combined with the kind of like the tortured intellectual, it started to kind of mill around in my head, and I knew that I wanted to combine that kind of like nerdish, bookish kind of quality with the resentment and the bile of someone who had been, twisted by, fate and physical circumstances to a point of becoming, capable of doing mass destruction and justifying it in his own mind. So I'm thinking about all this stuff, and I have a process of script analysis and kind of, character development work that I've done for many years. And so I think about stuff in those broad strokes, and then start to refine and play around with what the sounds might be. What does he sound like when he's screaming, when he's laughing, when he's crying, when he's threatening, when he's regretting, maybe, all these different kinds of moments that I might try to tease out. And I think about where my voice might sit along my vocal tract. So it's like, the vocal tract is sort of like the space between, say, the center of your chest and the tip of your nose. It's like the end of a cane, like a shepherd's crook kind of, that includes up in your head and into your sinuses and your soft palate and the back of your throat and the center of your throat and on down into your chest. So I think about like, where might it live?
And eventually things started to get up into here.
And it became this kind of raspy, kind of upper head voice with some guttural twinge to it, and the cackle, of course, of kind of every great hero every great villain that ever graced the stage or screen. And so I got to play with it a bunch, and as I settled into it, I sent Jerry a couple of samples, and he kind of gave me the green light to go follow your nose there, and so I did, and that's what it turned out to be.
Well, I can see why. I mean, thanks for giving the sample too, because I was actually going to say if you could actually give one, but hey, you beat me to it. That was phenomenal, and I could almost hear the Joker and the Witch and everybody in like just compounded into that one voice. And
Yeah.
I need to take a few lessons from you. I might sign up for one of your classes. So speaking of Jerry, we have other stories that are in play right now. And I believe you've been cast for another show. We're going to start recording soon, I believe. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about that new show and what character you're going to be playing?
Yeah, so the show is called Extinguished Worlds, and I'm really excited about it. It is, another dip into the hero-villain kind of space, and I play a character named Caleb, whose history is, and sort of, life is examined going from current all the way back to when he was a child. And actually, one of the really neat things that's going to happen is my son, and maybe even sons, both of them, but my youngest son, who is quite an animation star in his own right, is going to play the young version of Caleb. Whether or not my older son gets to do a guest star at some point remains to be seen, but I kind of tried to work that into my
No,
my
I actually heard about that in the last meeting that I had with Jerry, and that is fantastic. I mean, what a perfect way to have a younger version of your character play your younger version character's voice, but your own son. I mean,
well, and both
amazing.
of them, both my kids sound, now that they're the youngest one, again, who is like, he has done a lot of cartoons, and he's been doing them really just for a couple of years since COVID started. But one of the things that got him a bunch of jobs was that he was 12, but he could sound 6. So he could sit still like a 12-year-old and take direction like a 12-year-old and read like a 12-year-old, but he could sound like he was 6. And that's a valuable thing, because working as a director, working with 6-year-olds is very difficult, but working with 12-year-olds is a little bit easier. So he cleaned up for a couple of years. He was playing every little kid on TV, and it was awesome. His voice is starting to change now, so it's things are kind of going away a little bit, but he's got a real talent for it. He's got a natural kind of knack for it, and he's comfortable in the booth. The older one, who's 17 now, he's talented in a million different ways. He hasn't done as much acting, but he's a filmmaker, and he's puts himself in his own movies and so on. But if you were to hear the three of us say a single line just in our own straight voice, my oldest son and I, you'd have a hard time telling apart, and my youngest son can do our voice. And so, it's the three of us all sound very similar, and the idea of putting us on a timeline is like awesome. I love it.
I have 2 boys myself, and I have been told that when they're on the phone, it's hard to distinguish our voices, even between me and my own father. It's hard to. People when we get on the phone, they're like, "Oh, is this Odie?" And like, "No, it's not Odie. It's Jason." Oh, okay. I couldn't tell the difference. Especially now that I'm older, people have more of a difficult time. Well, that's great to hear that it runs in your family. Does your wife, by any chance, do any work like you do?
She doesn't, but she's a high school English teacher. And she was an actor in college, and she is, she's a lover of the theater and of performance. She was a singer for a long time too. She sang in an a cappella group in college. And so she's no stranger to it, but she doesn't do it professionally at this point. I guess you never say never, but I think I've thrown her into a thing or two on, sort of an indie project here or there along the way. But she mostly teaches English and likes it that way.
Awesome. So we're kind of getting to the end of our show here, and now's the point where I just say, if there's anything that you wanted to plug or talk about future projects, whether it's anything else with Jerry or even on your own, this is the chance to do it. I mean, if you want to talk about social media sites, anything like that, this is the opportunity. So I'm going to leave the stage to you on this one.
Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, keep your eyes open for Heroes of Extinction. When this thing launches in its proper form, I think it's going to bring the house down. I really do. I'm excited to be a part of it. I think the cast is amazing. The writing is amazing. The production is incredible. It's unlike anything I've heard before. And it's, I think when it finds its home, it's going to settle right in, and people are going to be amazed. So that's the first thing. And then, of course, Extinguished Worlds to be TBD in terms of release dates. I have a couple of things coming out that I can't actually talk about because they're we have to sign all these NDAs. But my biggest thing right now is I do this show, as I mentioned, Naruto, and specifically Naruto Shippuden, where I play Obito and Tobi, the 2 characters, these alter ego characters. And because of that, we've enjoyed a great amount of popularity, especially since COVID, because the show dropped freshly on Netflix and Hulu. So I'll be doing cons. Keep your eyes open for me there. I always make announcements on TikTok, sort of building my following there, where I am Tobito Voice. Or at Tobito Voice on TikTok and at Michael Yurchak on Instagram. And believe it or not, Instagram following and TikTok following does make a difference for us. It, especially in the con world, but also in terms of casting. It's one of the things that people look at. There was a time in my life where I fought that tooth and nail and felt that only our talent and performance should be contributors to how people end up getting jobs. And part of me still feels that way, but I understand that it's part of the puzzle and it really does help us. So if you're hearing this and you got a minute to spare and you don't mind adding me as a guy you follow on TikTok and or Instagram, I sure would love to see you out there in the internet.
Well, I know that I'll be hopping onto it after this show is over, and I will definitely be following you after this. So watch for JDB Voices to be a new follower, and you feel free to follow me back if you like. It's been a while since I've done anything on there, but again, any little help is always appreciated. So that's about all the time that we got for today, Michael. I'd really like to thank you once again for being on the show. It was a great pleasure to meet you and get to know you a little bit better. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to working with you on Extinguished Worlds.
Definitely. Same here.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all out there for joining us. Hope you had a great time listening. Here's hope you'll join us again for another one at the Down Low. Cheers.
All great stories begin with adventurous ideas.